Hello, everyone. I'm Keith the Stone, and I'm here with Greg Nagy and Sarah and Janet and Elaine for HeroesX Office Hours for V14 of HeroesX. And we're going to talk about hours 20 and 21, two Euripides tragedies. The discussion question for hour 20 is, just as Hippolytus is a called hero, in what ways can you say, based on the readings, that Phaedra is a called hero in her own right?
Mm-hmm. Well, one participant mentions that the fate of Hippolytus and Phaedra are interconnected. Okay, without the passionate love from Phaedra, would there be a cult hero for Hippolytus? And he even mentions what Artemis says at the end of her speech, that their names will be remembered, you know, both of them.
Yes, and I quite agree with the participant that the words of Artemis towards the end of this drama point to a hero cult for Phaedra as well as for Hippolytus. And I like the metaphor of intertwining. Very nice. But of course, the explicit reference is in Pausanias, who, when he visits the site of Troizenia, or Troizein, really makes it very clear that Phaedra herself has a hero cult, not just Hippolytus, and that these two cults are organically linked to each other. So there's no doubt. There's just no doubt, thanks to Pausanias. People could make the argument, if we had only Euripides and what we read in Euripides, that who knows, maybe Phaedra does not have a hero cult. But I think the testimony of Pausanias is quite clear.
Following on that, can we say an unrequited love is a vessel to become a cult hero?
I think that's a good way to become a cult hero. And in my various essays that are edited by our colleague Keith de Stone, I even have all sorts of references to cult heroes, female cult heroes, who die of unrequited love. And I'm thinking especially of Amazons. Now, ordinarily, we would not think of Amazons as suffering from unrequited love, but even they do. And so, yes, I'm very interested in female cult heroes who die because of unrequited love. I'll put it that way. I mean, the cause may be indirect.
One of the participants has picked up on the description that you gave early in H24H about the characteristics of a hero, the seasonality, and the difference in age, and the difference in falling in love with a young son, the extreme, and you've just been talking about that passionate love that is unrequited in this case. Yeah. And the antagonistic relationship with a god or a goddess in this case. Yeah. So are those sorts of things that we would be looking for if we were looking at other heroines, other female heroes, looking at those sorts of characteristics, so that we get that balance between all the heroes we've seen so far and female heroes?
I again wholeheartedly agree. In the case of Phaedra, I think there's one characteristic that is so blatant in Euripides' drama that I just must circle back to it, and that is the wandering mind of Phaedra, as I like to describe it. And in that exchange between Phaedra and the attendant, I don't like the word nurse, but let's use the word nurse. It's clear that her mind wanders to places where the young man Hippolytus would be engaged in either athletics or hunting. And if I may concentrate on hunting for a moment, if in her feelings of unrequited love, Phaedra has fantasies about hunting where Hippolytus would be hunting. Isn't it interesting that she even imagines herself in a painterly way? I like to put it that way because if we picture her, or to say it better, the words of Euripides picture her as picturing herself at the moment where she's throwing a hunting javelin at a deer. And at that point, her hair, her blonde hair, is floating beautifully in the wind, carried by the breezes. And there's a painterly reference to how the hair is in the background, the blonde hair, all disheveled erotically, and how the hair, the golden hair, is foregrounding the javelin as she throws it. So you can almost imagine the painting that the painterly verbal artist Euripides has painted for us, so to speak, in the imagination of Phaedra. What a beautiful image. And that is certainly a pose, may I put it that way, to honor our dear colleague Hélène, who is, of course, a student of French ballet and who understands pose as a freeze frame, as a moment that is, shall we say, arrested by a painterly imagination while in motion. Because that's what the ballet pose is you're looking at the motion, but you catch various moments that could be freeze framed. So this ballet pose, if I can put it that way, of Phaedra, wouldn't it be a perfect match for how Artemis herself would be throwing a hunting javelin? In other words, this is a deadly setup for God-hero antagonism, or shall I say it this way, female god, female hero antagonism, Phaedra and Artemis. And I love the fact that Phaedra's name even means moon glow, not sunshine, but moon glow. And of course, Artemis is the quintessential goddess of the moon. And that is even more explicit in the Roman reception of Artemis in her Latinate form as Diana. So I could go on and on. Phaedra is a perfect example of a cult hero who suffers from unrequited love. But to go back to my earlier point, you could make the same point about many other female heroes that we read about in myth, or that Pausanias reports about as cult heroes in his wonderful narratives about the various places he visits, where he always makes a beeline for, if he can, for what does the priestess say? What does the priest say in the locale that I'm investigating?
Well, I hate to tear us away from this part of our conversation, but we should move to the hour 21 question and talk about the Bacchae a bit. In the Bacchae of Euripides, how is the Kleos of Pentheus similar to the Kleos of Achilles in the Iliad?
A trick question, because the dissimilarities just confront us in such a direct way, but there are similarities.
Mm-hmm. Yes, there's a comment that they are similar in a way that they are both heroes who are opposed or against a god. In Achilles' case, it's Apollo, and it's in Pentheus, Dionysus, and both heroes and dying in a tragic way.
Exactly. And then when it comes to the death, then the differences really just hit us between the eyes, don't they? Is the idea of being torn apart by your own mother, being dismembered, is so different from the idea of being killed by the god Apollo. The second scenario is, of course, the fate of Achilles. The first scenario is the fate of Pentheus. Very different.
A participant pointed out to a significant role of mothers in both cases. Both mothers are in the forefront, and they are very active in both cases.
They're not only very active, but I think back to my earlier days in analyzing Iliad 9, and I think I went too far in my earlier work in assuming that Achilles already accepts the eventual epic fate that he will experience, which is that he will not go back to his homeland, but he'll stay and fight in Troy and achieve a Kleos that is unwilting, because he will die young at Troy rather than go home and, who knows, die old in his homeland. And I used to think that Achilles is already in a stance of having decided, but actually he hasn't decided yet. He won't decide that he will make this choice of staying and dying rather than going home and not yet dying until after the death of Patroclus in the Iliad. Then and only then does he says, "Nun de Kleos aroimen, nun de Kleos estlon aroimen," and now I will strive to achieve a Kleos that is genuine. Wow, that happens only later. Plato understood that all along. I should have read Plato more carefully, but in any case, I make up for my oversight in the book on ancient Greek heroes, H24H, where I do track the moment when Achilles finally decides to choose Kleos, which does not yet happen in 9. And it's not that I said anything explicitly wrong in the earlier book published in 1979, Best of the Achaeans, where I talk about the choice of Achilles. But let's put it this way, I leave it unclear in that work when the choice is made. And this all goes back, dear Janet, to what you're saying, is that the mother is key. The mother knows all along. It's just that the consciousness of Achilles has to be nurtured by the master narrator, just as his sensitivity improves as we go from Iliad 1 to Iliad 9, and then what happens later. And when it comes to Briseis, I don't really see any love for Briseis in Iliad 1. That's kind of shaded over, but then we understand in Iliad 9 that he really loves this woman.
So someone has been talking about a tradition about Achilles that is not in our Iliad, where he was hiding dressed as a woman
Yes.
in Skyros.
Yes.
And then we have this also cross-dressing, disguised as a woman scenario going on. which is a lot more Dionysian, I guess. But would the audience, if they were making connections with somebody like Achilles, would they make connections? Were there traditions about that with any other heroes?
Yes, absolutely. And the first example, the first other example that comes to mind immediately is Theseus, the cult hero par excellence of Athens, who is presented as a cross-dresser when he is very young, and that's just a detail that you can describe as anthropology 101. Is that if you trace the career of a young male hero forward in time, there will be a transition where it's possible for the hero to be described in female terms as having female characteristics before the eventual crossover into full-fledged male identity. And you could even argue that with Achilles, it doesn't really ever happen in some versions, because after all, he has long hair. In at least some versions, the versions that we're most familiar with, he does not yet have a full beard. So why not? It's a perfectly natural, so to speak, phase for a hero to go through. Achilles goes through it. Theseus goes through it, and therefore the moment where Pentheus is shall we say, pretending to be a girl, it is again something that an ancient audience, an ancient reception would understand as transitional. So it's hardly what is done sometimes in modern reenactments of this particular drama, where Pentheus is figured as a cross-dressing Blanche Dubois, as if he were a character from a Tennessee Williams play, and it's not grotesque. It's just messy, because I think she looks like a girl, but her costuming and her general appearance are messy, but they're still pretty, I'm quite sure. They're not, Pentheus is not a grotesque girl. I think she's a pretty girl who's very confused.
Well, with that, conversation seems to have drawn itself to a close, almost.
Well, it's kind of almost, I don't know, tragicomic, the way we ended it, which is not the way it's supposed to be. All I'm saying is Pentheus is no Blanche Dubois.
Right. Okay, so speaking of things drawing to a close, also this run of HeroesX, next week is Plato, the 2 Plato readings, and then we're almost done. Can hardly believe it.
It's been a wonderful journey.
Well, we will continue it soon. Till next time.